Okay, hello everyone, welcome again to today's lesson. Okay, so first of all, for today's lesson, I was thinking of doing something more practical, just like to get some practice with the concepts we saw the last time that were concerning the display, the positioning, and the boxes. So to do something more practical, I prepared this, no, not here, but here in our course website, in the scale section, you will find this playground. It is a link to the course repository, and I prepared these exercises that we can, these files with which we can play today and try to understand better the concepts that we saw last time. So in the meantime, if you want, please, if you have the laptop, please download them. As I told you last time, you can directly clone the whole repository, and then each time that I upload something, you just pull the contents and you have everything there, okay? So it is, today we will be working with the files under the 03 CSS folder, okay? Nice. So the last time we started seeing what CSS was, conceptually what it meant. We also did our first exercises. We explained the concept of classes, of IDs. We also saw what these units were. And we said that, are we going to prefer the absolute ones or the relative ones? The relative ones. When possible, we will use the relative ones. Why? Why do we prefer the relative ones? Yeah. Sure. It is because of the visualization purposes, no? With the absolute ones, they are fixed measures, while the relative ones, let's say that they comply with the screen size. Okay. Then we saw the display property. Do we understand what's the difference between inline and block display? The block display occupies the whole line and the next element goes below. And with the inline display, the elements are placed one next to the other one. So it just occupies the size of the content and the next element is displayed to the right. We will see that with examples to make it more clear. And so up to now, any questions? Everything clear up to now? Okay. So last time, I think we stopped here. We were going to talk about the box model. It's pretty simple. I just simply told you that every element in HTML is basically a box, no? All of the containers are basically a box. They are rectangles. And also the images, also the tables, also the footer, the header, the div container, everything is basically graphically represented. We can think of them, of all of the elements, as a box, no? And the box has some properties, very simple properties, very intuitive properties. There is the margin, that is the space that we leave from the element to the next one. So it's the outer space. Okay. Then we have the border, that is, as you can see in the diagram, it's pretty obvious what the border means. And then we have the padding that, contrary to the margin, is the inner space, no? The space between the border and the contents of the element itself. And then we have the content with the width and the height. This is not something pretty difficult. So in this case, for instance, in the one that we are seeing here, we can see that the margin and the padding are the same. Well, I don't know what to explain here. Maybe the margin is outside the border and the padding is within the border. Why is this important? Because when you will be working on your website display and in your website appearance, it's important to, if something doesn't work or if the space doesn't behave as you are expecting it to behave, the first thing to check is whether the margins are doing some mess or whether the margins are ruining the interface as you were expecting to have it. Okay. Nice. Then we had the positioning schemes. We had 4 types of positioning schemes: the static, relative, absolute, and fixed. Okay, let's see each one of them very quickly, and then we go to the CSS that we have there. So the relative, how does this one behave? So this one is relative to its original position. What was supposed to be its original position, and in relation to its original position, it moves. So it's let's suppose that it has like a link to the original position, and then you move it somewhere. So for instance, in this example that we are seeing in the snippet and the diagram on the left, we have that this item is 20 pixels to the, it has a space 20 pixels to the left and then 20 pixels from the top. Okay, that's the way how we read this specific snippet. So the element can be shifted relative to its normal flow position by applying vertical or horizontal offsets. Pretty intuitive, I think. Then we have the absolute one, that is positioned using the top, left, right, and bottom properties, and is related to the nearest positioned ancestor, meaning its parent, no? So it is not the absolute position, I mean it's the position with regard to its parent. We will see that in practice. We have the fixed one. That what's the characteristic of the fixed one? That it is positioned according or in relation to the whole viewport. We can think of the viewport as the window, no? So if we want an element to have a specific position in the window, then the positioning scheme or the positioning method that we can use is the fixed one. Okay, so it's not concerning its parent, it's not concerning its original position, but this one is regarding the window. We want to place a specific element in some position in the window, then we use the fixed one. And this one has the property that it remains there even when there is a scrolling, no? So we can think that if we have the page and we paste the element there, the element is over the page, so that if the page goes up or down, the element is anyway stays in the same position. We will see that in practice. We also talked about this zeta index. That is the index that we have like in the depth of the elements, so that we can place an element below or below in the front of or in the back, or we can organize the elements on the zeta axis, and it is also a very simple CSS property. So let me see if I don't forget anything. No, don't think so. So let's take a look at the playground. We can start with this one, with the units and display. So if you downloaded the repository, it should look like this. Here we have the index document. Do you see clearly the code? There, back in the back. Can you see? It's fine. The size and the okay. So first of all, what can we infer from this HTML up to now, without still running that or opening the HTML? How many classes do you think it has? There are several classes, no? We have the container one, and we have a class for each paragraph, or we assign a class for each paragraph. So we have rem, m, we have this one that is called boxes, we have a class for this div container, question: would it be possible to change these classes, or would it make sense to, instead of using a class here, using an ID? Yeah, in some cases it makes sense because we are applying this class just to a single element, no? So we want to format just a single element. So in that case, an ID would be fine, because in the ID, that's the idea, to format a specific element in the HTML. Anyway, in this case, we did it as classes. Maybe the only one in which it was not possible to use an ID was this one, because as you see, there are two elements formatted with the same class, with the same guidelines. So in this case, it wouldn't work, but other than this, maybe all of them could have been an ID, okay? Okay, so the structure here is basically like 3 containers, all of them being a section. Is a section fine here? Or it should have been an article or a header, a footer? We still don't know how it behaves, how it looks, but a header and a footer, maybe not, because we know what they represent in the HTML, and this one doesn't seem to be so. An article, well, maybe, but in this case, the section would work fine, because as we said last time, a section is like a generic container, no? Something that has a general purpose that doesn't concern like a main content of the site, but something generic. So in this case, it might work. And as you can see here, not everything must have like a semantic tag. In this case, the div is fine because it's both a specific element, a specific graphical element that doesn't have a semantic meaning. So in this case, using the div should be fine. Okay, so let's see how this looks. Okay, and this is this way because I changed this name, so it is not loading the CSS, because I accidentally changed the name. But now the name, you can see that here the CSS is below in the same folder, so it should be styles. Okay. Okay, so this is the how it looks. So concerning the units, the last time, well, let me open this one that is more useful. So the last time we said that there is like a font size that applies for the whole document, no? And that font size, in this case, we set it to 16 pixels, okay? Then we have the percentage. Let me check something. Okay, let's start with the simple ones. So we had like the VH and the VW, okay? In this case, we said that the measure was concerning or was with relation to the viewport, no? So it is a percentage of the window that we want to use, that we want to occupy. So when, for instance, we say 50 VU is like we want to occupy half of the window. Being our window, for instance, this one, you can see that the red one, that is the 50 VW, occupies almost the half, no? I mean, the distance from here to here, let's see that, let's say that is this, I mean, it is, but we can notice it by eye that is the same distance from here to here. So in this case, it's kind of trivial because we know that we are setting the size of the elements with respect to a percentage of the window, okay? And the same happens for this one, no? The VH height. So in this case, we are setting it to a 20% of the height of the window, okay? So here, if we multiply or if we think of this as 5 boxes, one below the other one, we can say that we will reach like the whole height of the window, okay? So this one is the simple one, the simplest one. Then we have the REM and we have the EM, okay? What was the difference between them? One of them was related to the font size of the HTML, we call that font size the root font size. And the other one is related to the font size of the parent component. So if I change this value here from 16 to 32, this one changed because this one is related to the root font size, but this one remained the same. Did you notice that? So this one is the same, okay? Because this one is not related to the font size of the root element, but the font size of the parent element. How do we check that? Because the container has its own font size. So in the structure, we have the container and we have two paragraphs. One that is called REM and the other one that is called EM, okay? The one that is EM will change according to the root font size, and the one that is called REM will change according to the container font size, okay? Indeed, the opposite. This one will change concerning the root font size, and this one with respect to the container font size. So if I change the whole document font size to 8, we can see that this one changed, the REM one changed, and this one remained the same. How do I change the size of this one, or how would this size change? If I change the font size that I declared in the container, because it will vary according to the parent's font size. So if I say here 30, so this one changed. Okay? Somehow, I don't know if you can see this one. Okay, so the rem, the root element font size, and one rem is everywhere in the document. Rem is a good unit for setting font sizes. Okay, why is this a good unit? Because it will keep consistently among the different components in the document. If we define a different font size for each element, then the interface would look non-consistent and the font sizes would go like crazy. So that's for that reason that we prefer this one over this one. Okay, we just want to have one default font size, and then all of the elements try to comply or try to play with them so that they are consistent or they are related to one specific font size. Is clear this idea? Is clear the difference between them? Questions? Okay, nice. And now here in the lower part, we have the display property. This one, I think it's more simple. We have a section. Okay, we have the title, that is display property. We have the div with this specific div saying I am a block element, and then we have two span elements. The first one behaves as a block, and the other ones behaves as an inline. Okay. Let's check what would happen if instead of block I say inline here. Did you see what happened? So this one is not occupying anymore the whole width of the window, but it's occupying just the space of its content. Be careful, because here, I mean, I'm sorry, this maybe is my fault, because here maybe you can get the idea that I'm setting the property directly into the HTML. It is not that way. I'm doing this because on the CSS I have a class that is called block. Okay? And within this class I'm defining the properties and I'm defining the display behavior. Okay? So this name doesn't, there is not the obligation to write this name in a certain way, or this name doesn't have to have any semantic. Instead, I will write okay, just to show that that name doesn't have any meaning, doesn't have any semantic. Just because you write the name with a given property name, it won't work magically. It is just referencing a class that on the CSS should be named the same way. Okay, and the rules and the properties and everything else is defined within the class, within the CSS. Is it clear? And then we have the inline. If here instead of inline we change this property for block, what are we expecting to happen? Let's check. Then each one of them will occupy the whole width and they will be placed one below the other one. Okay? This example is still very simple, but it's a powerful concept. It's something important because depending on this, we will be able to organize the elements in our layout in a more similar way to how the websites are built. No? If we think of the websites, they are not built like a Word document, but they are built like placing things next to the other one. There are variable heights, there are variable widths. So this is basically the concept and how everything behaves behind, okay? Question: if we wanted, for instance, to change this from, let's do example with this one, okay? If we wanted to change this one from class to ID, what should we do? So instead of class, of course, here we would write ID, and then on the CSS, instead of block, was it block? Oh, sorry. Okay, so in this case, it works. Of course, if we set this to point, it won't work because it is expecting to apply that to a class, or it represents a class, not an ID. Okay, very trivial, but it's good to. Do you remember how to add comments to an HTML document? This way, okay? Questions? Everything clear? Okay. Now let's check the other one. That is the one concerning the positioning of the elements. Here, for instance, before opening before previewing the HTML, what is happening here? How do we understand this syntax? What does it mean?
There are two classes.
That two classes are being applied to that element, okay? Is it possible? Is it possible to apply more than one class to an element? Yeah, it is possible. Why do you think that in this case they are applying several times the same class to different elements? Because somehow we want to format them in the same way. So we can infer that these elements, these containers, we want them to look the same. So it doesn't make sense to create one different class for each element, but we create a common one and we apply that style. Yeah.
In this case, could we also write the box class between the sections classes?
Between the section classes, you mean here?
Yeah.
No, because in that case it would apply the format. I mean the section class is the container, the one that holds all of the boxes within. And this is the style that we want to give to each box. Okay? And the reason why we apply the same class to all of the boxes is because we want all of the boxes to look the same to some extent. Okay? Okay, and before opening the preview, let's take a look at the style. So here, for instance, we can see that the box has a specific properties, no? So in the box, we define the width, the height, the margin, the padding of the box, a default color, and this font weight, that is the one that enables us to say the style of the text. In this case, is bold. Okay, so all of the boxes, all of the containers here, all of the divs will initially look like this. Okay, because all of them belong to the box class. And then depending on each one of them, it will have changed something. We will make some variation on each box depending on the second class that they have. Okay, so basically what changes depending on the second class, it changes the position. That is what I want to show you, how the different positions behave. And it changes the background color, no? So depending on the position, somehow it's done so that I can set different colors to the boxes with different positions, okay? Okay. So it looks like this. The first one is the static one, and it has color gray. What position is occupying this box? Well, the one that by default should be occupying, no? So the one that is below the title, and it is occupying this position. Why do you think it has some space here and some space here? Some clear space? What's the reason this one is not starting from here like the text above, but it is starting like it has a shift? Because of the margin, no? So here, for instance, we know that the margin is 20. But if we set the margin to 0, then you can see that it sticks to the left border, okay? And then why this static is not starting from here, stick to the border? Because of the padding. Yeah. So here, when I remove this padding, you can see that all of the boxes, that I remove the padding from all of the boxes, okay? Why does it remove from all of the boxes? Because all of them belong to the box class. Okay, so this one is the simplest one. The element stays in the position where it is supposed to be placed. Then we have this relative position, that is from where the original position of the element should be, I'm going to make a shift, no? So in this case, for instance, I decided to move 20 to the top. No, not 20 to the top. Leave 20 pixels from the top and leave 20 pixels from the left, with concern to the original position that it should occupy. Okay? So if, for instance, I remove these shifts, you can see that it has basically the same position that the static element has. Okay? If I do the shift, then it moves with regard to the original point where it should be placed. Okay? Clear? Nice. Then the absolute one. What's the difference with the relative? That this one moves in relation to its parent component. So the parent component here is this box, the relative box. And we can see it here, no? We have the box relative, and within the box we have the absolute one. Okay, so this one is a child of the relative one. Why do we have this space here? Why this one is not placed? I mean, since we don't have any shifting, we could expect this one to be placed here in the corner, no? Why this one is not placed in the corner?
Because it is inside the
Yeah, it is inside, but why? There is another reason. Because, I mean, if we don't have any shift to the top or to the right, we would expect this one to be placed here, no? Because it is placed with concern to its parent component. So why this sense?
Because the box class also has a padding value.
Yeah, because in this case, this one also has the margin, no? Because it is still a box, so we are having this margin here of 20 pixels. Indeed, this is a good example to show what happens if I copy this property, and for the absolute one, I set this one to 0. What happened? It eliminated the margin for this specific one, okay? And then you can see that it places, well, with concern to its parent, specifically on the same coordinates, okay? And then if I change this position, for instance, 20, well, let's say a smaller one, five pixels, and this one, for instance, 10 pixels, it changed with regard or with concern to its parent component, okay? And the last one is the fixed one, okay? So in the fixed one, what I did to show you how this fixed one worked was that here I created like a div class, an empty class that had like a huge height, so that for instance, I just added a space here, white space here, so that I can show you the behavior of this one that stays always in the same position, even if I scroll down, okay? This is what we understand by the fixed position. How the position of this one is set? It is set with these two variables that represents also a shift from the bottom of the screen. So from the bottom there are 10 pixels. If I change this one to 50, you can see that the space here increased. And if I set this one also to 50, the space here increased, okay? So now, for instance, knowing this, we can already create that button that we saw last time that the Politecnico page has, okay? This is the trick, the magic behind that button. I know that this can be kind of trivial, but well, I prefer to explain this and make this pretty clear so that all of us understand the basics, because having a good understanding of the basics will help us to build everything more easily. So is everything clear? Yeah.
Why is the red box relative to the top right corner and not the top left?
Because by default, I think the default behavior is setting it relative to the top right border of the parent component. Let me check something. Indeed, this is a good question to exemplify. Do you remember we had this website? So let's Exit position. Well, yeah, I think the default behavior is with concern to the top right corner of the element. I would say so. Okay, fine. So we already know the CSS basics. Last time, by the end of the class, I show you that we are not going to do all of the CSS from scratch because it doesn't make so much sense. But instead of that, we will use a library, a CSS library, that basically is CSS written by someone else that we can use and appropriate in our layouts. Okay, and the one we're going to use is Bootstrap. Okay. However, we still have some topics to see concerning the CSS because what we can do with the things we have learned so far, it's kind of limited. No, it's not. We're still needing some concepts to build something more complex. So we will understand how to create advanced layouts. We will see the responsiveness that some of you have mentioned. What is the responsiveness? What do we understand by responsiveness? Yeah, the capacity of an app of a web application or of the display to change depending on the device opening the page from. So we know that our website is well designed when we open it from our cell phone or from the iPad, and anyway we can understand what the contents are and all the components organized and set up according to the screen. And then we will use libraries that it has to do with Bootstrap. We are still here, we are still talking about CSS. Okay, and we will do this the same as we did with the boxes and with the positioning. We will try to understand this conceptually with the slides, and then next class I will show you, I will prepare a playground so that with the playground we can experiment and see what this means in practice. Before doing this, I don't want to forget. Do you remember that at the beginning of the course I told you that we were going to work on an application that we will, all of us, build here incrementally during the lessons? I mean, there is the one that you will be working on the laboratory, and then there is an application that we should agree what do we want to implement, and we will work on that application here. So that's all of the times after all of the classes after the theoretical lesson, we can apply the concepts that we saw to our application. So, do you have something in mind? It's completely open, so do you have in mind like a kind of complex web application you would like to build during this semester, all of us together? Do you have any idea? Just to give you an example, for instance, 2 years ago it was no, because I can't remember the name, but it was something like that you can, like a web application for the Mensa, for the canteen, no? So that, well, not very interesting, but it was that you could, for instance, see the menu, the day menu, and see what the Mensa or the canteen was offering that day. I think it had like a reservation functionality so that you can reserve some dish or some table, and there was something, well, it was basically like that. It was not super interesting, yeah.
Will we use like a public API to get some data somewhere, or it will all be local?
We might. Up to now we haven't done that, but with what we will learn is possible too. And the last year that I remember that one, it was called like C'è Posto, there is place, and it was like for the how do you call them, the aula, sì, le aule di studio, the rooms, the study rooms. So it was just foreseeing which available study rooms there were at the Politecnico, and that you can like interactively see how many places were there and do some reservation and that kind of stuff. Okay, so well, they are pretty simple applications, but it has some complexity that we can show, so that we can show the concepts that we will work on here. But the question is, do you have any suggestion on what you would like to work on this semester? Does it something come to your mind?
For example, like an online shop that you can add stuff to the basket.
Like an online shop could be nice, yeah, maybe something like that. But maybe a specific shop. So what do you think?
It can be like for books.
Like a bookstore? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe a bookstore can work. The problem with the online shops is that they are like pretty generic, no? They don't have like any specific functionality. Something. So for instance, in the C'è Posto, that was the one for the study rooms, you had the chance to visualize how many seats, to reserve a seat, to cancel a reservation, well, and we could imagine like new functionalities. Instead, with just with an online shop, they already have like a very strict set of functionalities, so there is not so much room for creativity. But yeah, for sure, something that you might buy or reserve should be.
A website for rating all the exams.
For rating the exams, like the courses.
Yeah.
That one, yeah.
I have the IWA for LLMs, for example, the ChatGPT.
Okay. Yeah, it is just that in that case, it doesn't have so many. I mean, because we try to have an application in which different kind of user roles can be involved. In that case, it would be just like the one single user that is using our application. I mean, it makes sense, but for the purpose of the course, we would like to have, for instance, an administrator and a regular user, a student, something like that. Also because I want this application to be kind of as similar as possible to the exam application that I will be asking you to implement. So, yeah.
But in this case, there is the Open Web UI that is designed this way. Like it has roles with the users, administrator,
But what do you mean? In this case of LLAM?
Open API is the name.
Okay.
Open source project.
Okay, okay.
And it is good because it has chats, so it interacts with database.
Okay. Let's have that one in mind. No, because I'm perceiving that it might get very difficult, but okay, an option.
What about a simple web game with a leaderboard, something like that?
A game could be fine. The only thing that is that a game requires like some visual and graphical display that, I mean, the animations and all of that stuff that would be nice, but it is difficult.
Maybe like a personal finance web app, but it could seem too simple.
Okay.
But maybe the like categories. I mean, everybody
Not everyone can.
finance, or maybe like use an API to get like the data of the stock market.
Okay.
Create a web app that simulates what if we put certain amount of money, what would happen to it.
What could happen? Sure. That one should be super nice. That one should be super nice. The only thing is that it requires some knowledge on finance and such kind of. Usually, okay, I will go to you, but usually the reasoning to find an application that all of us are interested in, it's to find like something that is painful to you here at the Politecnico, no? Some painful issues, something that you always suffer doing. I know there are many things, but try to find one that all of you like really feel painful. And then we try to, so for instance, the one of the Mensas one, the canteens one, was because someone said it is always a nightmare to go there and it is always super full and it would be nice to know what the menu is and have a way to reserve, something like that. Also the Ceposto, that it was the same. Okay, no, I remember. The first one was called Mangiato, that is eaten, and it had like the to for Torino, no? Because everything here at the Politecnico is polito, mangiato, mixto, so it was because of that, mangiato. The last one was ceposto, just to make it work with the to, and this year is not compulsory, but we can find up some, yeah.
Maybe like a platform that connects students that want student tutors, and then tutors that can also advertise themselves, and there would also be a review system.
That one could be nice, yeah. That one could be nice. Yeah.
A cooler GTT live router.
Okay. Let's deal with the GPT.
What if, for example, there is a website to apply for student teams?
To?
Applying for student teams. And
For student teams, okay, like the.
they can publish their ad, and a student can apply
For
each
the.
department of those teams.
Okay.
Something like that.
Nice. But how that usually works is the student that applies, and then they get the applications and they interview you.
Right now, it's like they publish an email.
Okay.
But what if there is a website that like they can publish it on the website?
Okay.
So they can say, for example, we need 20 people, 30 people for this department. For example, for CS, we want 5 people. For this one,
Okay.
10 people. And they can also apply. They can, for example, I don't know, say the resume.
Okay. But that one could be nice. The only thing is that I think that the whole interaction is pretty simple, no? Because it's just like the submission of the application and it ends there, no? That the one of the how do you call them? The finding someone that helps the tutors is nice because other than finding the tutor, then you send the request to a tutor, then he might accept your request, then you have the possibility to set yeah, a grade to the tutor and write a comment, something like that. So the interaction could be more complex. So in that case, well, I would prefer that one. What else? Something that here at the Politecnico you suffer with? Yeah?
For example, a site that a single student has the possibility to apply or in a group, for example, the selling group or the Polito course.
Yeah?
And in every page, we
Yeah.
can choose the activity or, for example, to buy the merch branded by the group.
Okay, okay. Yeah, but the same as here, no? Because he already told that it's fine, but the only thing there is that the interaction is pretty simple, no? Because it ends when I apply to the group, and maybe when the group accepts me, and then everything. I mean, it's just basically like a submission, and it ends there. With the other one, maybe we can try to create some other interactions or some other functionalities. Okay, so any other painful? Because the one you told, it was the...
The GPTs seem to be useless. So a website trying to rate the exams.
Okay. Okay. Okay, but somehow in that case, functionally, from technically point of view, that functionality can be integrated into the other one, no? The possibility to add a grade to the tutor or to the professor in this case is basically the same technically. So yeah, we're basically talking about the same thing. So yeah, maybe a place where you can find people that can help you to study to exams, like a centralized platform where you can look for, well, I'm looking for someone that could help me with the introduction to web application course. And that also from the other side, you can publish also an announcement. I am a tutor for this course and I'm able to give help. That you can set a price, like an hour price, and maybe also to filter by courses, by reputation, by price, something like that. Do we all like this one, this idea? It's kind of important because it's the application that we will be working on the whole semester. So do we all feel enthusiastic about this one? Perfect. Nice. So next time, next class that we will have more knowledge, we will start working on that. And how do we want to call the application? It has to finish with to. So let's think of that, and next time we will find out something. Okay, so nice. Now we will talk about the page layout. So what is the layout? The way in which the elements are distributed in the screen. There are basically, and there is basically this powerful concept that is a grid layout. Okay, how a grid layout behaves, basically, as you can see on the right diagram, it basically enables to design the web pages using a two-dimensional grid structure. So a grid, we can think like of an Excel spreadsheet, that it has like cells and columns and rows. And it's pretty simple, but although it's a simple concept, you can see that all of these, for instance, all of these layouts can be somehow achieved and built by using rows and columns, okay? And mixing them, and for instance, this one is like the default one, but then you can make, for instance, 2 rows to be mixed to form a bigger cell, and well, that's basically what we can do with Excel too. So which are the basic concepts here in the grid layout? That we have a grid cell, then we have the lines, or the lines, that is kind of this one. We have like the grid track, that is the row basically. we have columns, and then we can, by playing with the rows and the columns and the grid cells, we can build like these grid areas. Okay, so conceptually, it's pretty simple. Okay, let's try to understand this from the code, and next time we will do the example so we don't lose so much time writing the code. So to create a grid, how do you, or at this point you can explain me what is happening here. So in this case, which one is the grid? Or how does this behave? We have a container, like a parent container, that within has like 10 small containers or 10 elements, let's say. We want the big one to behave as a grid container, no? So we want the big one to organize the elements or to set the elements within him as if it were a grid container. How do we set or how do we specify that we want this container to behave as a grid? By means of this property, no? Display grid. What do you think these two property mean? For this one, for instance, has 3 values, right? And the other one has 2 values. So what can we infer from this? Six? Yeah, but why? How many columns this will have? 3 that are specified by indicating the width of each column. So for instance, we said we will have a first column that will occupy 100 pixels, the second one 100 pixels, and the third one 100 pixels. So 3 columns, each one of them 100 pixels. And then how many rows? 2. How do we know that there are 2 rows? Because there are 2 values associated with this property. Okay. And then what do you think it's this one? The grid gap, the space that we want to leave between the cells, no? So that we don't want all of them to be completely sticked, but we want to leave like a small space between them. Yeah, it's pretty intuitive. It's nothing super complex. What happens in this case? What is different in this case? What do we achieve by setting by specifying the columns in this way? We want to make sure that they occupy the same space, no? That from the all available space, they occupy one portion of that available space. That is this fraction, one fraction of the space. What happens if, for instance, the first one were specified like 200 pixels and the other 2 ones were specified as 1 FR, 1 FR? That the other ones will distribute the available space that remains from the first one, from the 200 pixels. Okay. And we have still a different representation of a different syntax to write to express what we had before. That is by using this repeat. So it's basically the same, will work the same, but instead of writing 3 times the same value, we can use this repeat. Okay, with this syntax at the end. This is not a function. This is not something that is declared somewhere else. It's just a syntax to express in a different way the behavior.
Can we also use it in padding and margin?
I use?
Can we also use it in padding and margin?
Sure. Because we still don't know in this case, of course, this is some very kind of a stupid example because we are just having a number within the div. But typically, what you will have there is, for instance, a section of the website, no? Or publicity or something like that. So depending on the component that you want to set into that specific cell, you will want to format it or to give more space or to format more complex the elements. Is it possible? Sorry. Is it possible to mix the units? To say, for instance, 130% and 1 FR? Yeah, it is possible. It might get super messy because you don't know what you are dealing with, or you are mixing like fixed values with relative values. That it might be kind of strange, but technically it's possible. And then, what do you think this one is for? And pay attention that in this one, we are applying this property to the bigger container, no? Instead, here, we are applying this property. We are applying these properties not to the container, but to each element, no? So we are setting properties for each element there. Does it make sense to set a class for each element here? Well, it's fine, but it could also have been an ID, no? Because each element has its own formatting, so an ID could also have worked in this case. Okay, a question? No, okay. What do you think this, or how can we try to interpret this snippet, these rules? Yeah. Yeah. Somehow it says how much space do we want our cell to occupy, and it basically defines that space that area, the one that we saw here. This area is defined by saying where do we want our item to start, in which row and in which column do we want it to start, and in which row and in which column we want it to end, no? So, for instance, when we have something like this, it will start in the second row until the third row. So it will occupy just one row, okay? And here it will start from the second column up to the third. So this is basically somehow useless because, well, it will still occupy just one box, one cell. But it's useful because it will set that specific cell into a specific position. So it is not by default just to occupy the first cell on the top left corner, but it will set it to the second row and the second column. So it will be like in a different position. Okay. And this is an alternative syntax. That is an alternative representation of what we wrote here. Okay, this is basically the same, but a different way to write this one. It is just that in this one, although it's longer, but it's more clear. In this one, we might get confused. So. So, do we conceptually understand how the grid works? So if you want to think of a grid, you can think of a grid as an Excel spreadsheet or as something like this. Nothing very difficult, it just has rows, columns, and cells. I think it's better if we stop here because next time we will start with Flexbox, that is more, yeah, a second. It adds like a space between the cells. like a gap between the cells. Okay. 1 second. We will stop here because the flexbox is more interesting. So we will start tomorrow with this one, and I will prepare a playground. So I will be uploading on the website the same as today, the playground, if you want to play with it before coming to class. Okay. Thank you.